As you were told by Corporal McGass, some are domestic related. Some people know each other. Some have just been random businesses. Some are drug related. So we don't have a pattern that we can actually look at and try to deploy in specific areas. They're pretty much all over the city. There are no specific times of day. There are no specific days of the week. Usually when we have shootings, what we immediately do in patrol, what I have patrol officers do, is called a 72-hour after action. And what it is like, for an example, the shooting in Robinwood. We make sure that there is enhanced patrols in that community for 72 hours straight. What we're looking for are people in the community to give us information. We are stopping people to identify people that we know don't belong in the neighborhood, or if somebody tells us they don't belong in the neighborhood. We put traffic units in the area to do traffic enforcement. We utilize a traffic car that has cameras on it that collects information of tags that are running and all that, information on tags. So we do enhanced patrols. So that's what we do in cases like the shootings. What we've been doing lately, because there's no specific patterns with all these robberies and the shootings, we have enhanced patrols. We're concentrating on the West Street and Forest Drive corridor. Again, we're using officers in plain clothes and uniform. We put out vehicles, we call it the ghost car. When you see cars in specific communities or business complex, in hopes of keeping people away from the area, not knowing that police are there or not there. We've been utilizing that. With the 72-hour after action, we usually just have officers go into areas, write tickets, pull people up. But with some of the other ones, we've been working with criminal investigations, specifically asking them what do they need from us out of the community. So instead of just putting officers in the area just to be out there, we're actually asking the supervisors, what do you want us to actually do? We get intel information from the detectives. We get intel information from our intel units. So we're constantly feeding each other information. Whatever the patrol officers get, they report back to intel or CID and community services, of course, because they are the utmost important as well, because they're in the communities also. And now with this new enforcement team, neighborhood enforcement, we're utilizing them also because they're specifically in the Harbor House, Eastport Terrace area. One of the ways that we get information in the communities is with field interview reports that we tell the officers to make sure they get. We're looking for suspicious people, we're looking for suspicious vehicles, anything that looks out of the ordinary, people out of place in certain business complexes. Let's say 3 o'clock in the morning, we have somebody on a car lot. If an officer's riding by, who's looking to buy a car at 3 o'clock in the morning? So situations like that, they're stopping, they're talking to them, and they're getting their information so that we can bring that information back to give to all the units in the department, so in the police department, so we know what's going on out there. Of course, when things happen, we go to the neighboring businesses and we ask for video footage to see who has cameras, what may be captured on cameras. We get that information through intel, download that, detectives look through that. We also utilize our own cameras. We have a camera room here. We can go back and see what we can find on the streets if there was any kind of activity to try to narrow down times. We have a flex unit also that's out, and what they've been doing lately is they've been in what we call hotspots in specific communities, in the Harbor House, in the Eastport Terrace, in Robinwood, Clay Street. So they're out in the neighborhoods when they're working, and they usually work until 3 o'clock in the morning. We've been doing surveillance. We use surveillance techniques. So even though right now the crime is up and is going up now, we're still way down in crime in the last few years. It is alarming, but because it's sporadic all over the city and we don't have a set pattern, and we are locking up half, I think we've pretty much closed out half the robberies at this point because of what they are. It is alarming, but know that we're out there and trying to collect as much information and putting people out in areas as best we can, because it's all over the city. And of course, we don't have enough police to put in specific areas all over the city. So we're trying to narrow it down in businesses. We have the net unit that's out in Harbor House, Eastport Terrace, and we have the flex unit that's out in the other hotspot areas as well. So we are trying to step up patrols, enhance patrols. And what we also need from you all, because it is your community, this is your city, we of course can't do it by ourselves. A lot of times people will see something suspicious and don't think they should call us. If you see something that you believe is out of the ordinary, please pick up the phone and call. It may be something, it may not be nothing, but we don't know unless you give us the information. An example of that is one night, this was a few years ago, we were looking for someone over in West Annapolis. I can't remember exactly what it was he had done, but we had a helicopter out, we had K-9 out, we had county police out, you know, we're searching all over in West Annapolis. I was the lieutenant then at the time in patrol. I get a phone call the next day when I'm in there. Someone called and said, you know, last night I saw the helicopter flying around and it was someone in my neighbor's shed. That was the next night. So anything that you think is suspicious or out of the ordinary, it can't hurt to call us. That's what we're here for, and we need to work together. Okay? Any questions?
Just to comment on what the captain said about hotspots, how they are deployed based on hotspots is number based, so it's based on number of calls, and it is actually, we have a crime analyst that will actually type in and it'll print out a graph. So if we got 1,000 calls on President Street, it doesn't make a difference because our chief is a numbers person. I can sit there and say all day long, I've been on Clay Street and they tell me the problems are there, and he will say, Jess, I don't have any calls from Clay Street. I do have 100 calls from 1200 Forest Drive. That's where I need to deploy. So that's why we encourage so many phone calls. It doesn't matter if you call 3 times for the same thing. That is a call that now creates a record that our crime analyst can pull and say, no, Jess is right. They are calling on Clay Street. So because the numbers often come back in my face when I do so. So we do have Detective Piles here if anybody has further questions for any of the recent things. If not, retired Detective Hartlove, who we still grab to come back here and help work with us, and Mr. Hudson are going to present on human trafficking. I know we've had some issues, especially in the Hispanic community, with recent sex offenses and stuff like that going on that are pretty alarming for pretty much everyone because of the involved. Does anyone have any questions for Detective Piles? Or me while they set up?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
What is a net unit? You said there's a net unit in Harbor House?
Yeah, it is the neighborhood enhancement team. I don't know, are they going by enhancement team or enforcement team? It's neighborhood enhancement team. It used to be the neighborhood enforcement team. And it is 4 officers and a supervisor, and they predominantly work foot patrol in those areas. Harbor House and Eastport Terrace and in the streets a little bit on the outskirts thereof, because that's where we have, again, based on call based and stuff, determined to be one of the hot spots for now.
Sergeant, is the net team in uniform or undercover or both?
They're in uniform. They're in uniform and they have marked cars. However, usually what you may see is the car parked and they're probably on foot. So it's like they have a ghost car somewhere and then they're on foot in another area.
Yeah, their goal is to interact with the community and talk with the community and find out what the community's problems, what the community feels their problems are, and work with them to combat those problems. It's not to, with a heavy hand, enforce every violation necessarily. So. And
they do the inspections with the housing authority and identify problem residents and so on and so forth. Ready, gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay.
As Joe's setting up here, I'll just introduce myself. Again, I was a detective here for 26 years and then retired and worked down the State's Attorney's Office now as an investigator. I mainly do fraud, white-collar crime. Just to let you know, and I think we're going to do a little presentation in the coming months over at Bates, Wally Bates, especially for the elderly abuse. There's a lot of there's new laws out there now where family members can't abuse their elderly family members and take money and stuff like this, and it gets reported straight to the State's Attorney's Office. So that's what I'm doing now. As, again, you know, I was in CID for 10 years prior to this, and what Joe is going to talk a little bit about is some of the cases that started in 2008. I got a little folder here that has some information in it about the case, as well as the pictures of the two defendants, the two main defendants. There was other people and other victims. And you're going to have to excuse me too. If I mention the word, you know, do mention the word prostitute, I don't mean it to offend anyone. They are victims. It's no doubt in my mind they're victims. And out of this case, we did, I think there was probably about 4 to 5 victims of the case that we've helped and got involved into. It's called Polaris House. So they've, you know, received some help. So I'm going to pass this around. You're more welcome to look at it and go through it. I do need it back though. And you'll see at the end result, the federal case just got resolved, so on the human trafficking part. It was involving a homicide. I can't talk too much about the homicide because the homicide is still going on. I can generalize on some of it, but Joe, you want to start off?
Yeah. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about human trafficking and focus mostly on prostitution. Human trafficking can take a lot of different forms. It could be put into factories, they can be put into all types of different situations. And tonight we're really going to talk about prostitution because it's really an up and coming problem. It's getting bigger in this country. It's getting bigger across the world. You know, I used to have a view of prostitution that those were a group of girls or guys that chose that for a living. That there was an easy way for them to go out and make money. And the plain truth about it is, now that I'm a little bit educated and I've seen and talked to a lot of these girls, this is a slavery type situation. A lot of these girls are being put into this business either to pay off the debt or they're just being plain forced into the situation. They don't really make any money off the deal. As a matter of fact, if they owe a debt, they'll never pay the debt off. And we're going to get into a little bit about that as we go on. But for the most part, all these people are being forced into this lifestyle that they're in. I can figure out how to work my projector here.
Fancy.
Yeah. There we go. All right, we're going to start off with a few numbers. 27 million people are involved in modern day slavery across the world. Is that a number that y'all would have guessed, or would y'all have guessed much lower numbers? I was startled when I saw that number. 800,000 people trafficked across international borders every day. Every year, I'm sorry. What's our primary border that's being used on a daily basis? It's our Mexico border. That's the border that everybody says it's under control, it's sealed off. I can tell you for a fact that I've talked to kids, I've talked to parents in Annapolis itself that have come across the border and were put into prostitution or put into the drug trade coming across the border as they thought they were coming over here to start a new life for themselves. 1 million is the number of children exploited globally for commercial sex trade every year. It doesn't just happen to adults, it happens to kids ranging from ages 8 to 14. $32 billion total yearly profits generated by human trafficking. What other business can you think of that generates that kind of profits? But yet, we don't hear about this problem in our society. It's a problem that people really aren't aware about. It's a problem that's kind of hidden in society. Foreign nationals trafficked into the United States. We looked globally, now we're going to look at the United States.